Okay, now we can start.
All right. Welcome, everybody. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. S. I am the coordinator of the hale M.A. program. And what a wonderful job I have with this program, simply because of the wonderful types of people we have in the program, but the different fields that they represent. And today we're going to talk about a very important topic that many can relate to, and I'm sure you hear it in the news, media, everyday life, the role of AI. And I have the pleasure to facilitate this conversation. And just for those who are new to this, this is not whereby each panelist kind of presents something or research. It's just, you could just imagine us being in a talk show host with me as the host, and all these folks are in my living room, or what we'll call the virtual living room, where we're going to post some questions and have a wonderful conversation. So with that said, I just want each one of you, of our wonderful panelists who are joining us, in terms of just briefly introduce yourself in terms of where you are. I mean, where you are in the program, hale M.A. or whatever hale program you're part of, but also what do you do professionally and how AI intersects with your current practice. So we'll start with whoever wants to start.
I can go first. I was first to unmute here. Uh, my name is Jacob Fortman. I'm a second year PhD student in the Higher Adult and Lifelong Education program here. Most of my research academic interests are around teaching and learning, curriculum and pedagogy, and technology, and how it kind of impacts teaching and learning practices, particularly in socially and political meaningful ways. My prior kind of professional experiences were also working in ed tech spheres, with virtual reality, massive open online courses, and then also AI in some capacities as well. So it's nice to be here, and happy to continue to think about the impact of AI and how it can shape teaching and learning, and the ways we think about what counts as innovative teaching and learning.
Wonderful. Welcome, Jacob. Who's next?
I can go next.
Sure.
Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Murphy. I am a third year student in the hale PhD program, and I pretty much focus on graduate students and particularly graduate career and professional development. So for the last 2 years, I was the career advisor, primarily for PhD students in the graduate school. I am no longer in that role, but I am still doing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff and research and things like that. So I am thinking about AI in how it can help with your career preparation, your professional development, your career search, things like that.
Perfect. Welcome, Teresa. It's always nice to see the different intersections as well as different contexts. Last but not least.
Yes, hi, my name is Allison Toe. I am the senior Title IX investigator in OCR. I am in my, I'll say, third semester in the hale program, so second year kind of, I don't know. We have started having conversations about utilizing AI in the Title IX world to ensure that we are having an accurate record and documentation of folks' experiences in a way that is both trauma informed, but also accurate, and just in exploring other ways that we can utilize AI to support students and folks going through the process. So excited to be here today as well.
Yeah, just to clarify, Allison is actually part of the hale M.A. program in her third semester, and it's well, great to have you here as well. Okay. So, I mean, AI, I mean, we hear the word AI, and means so many different things. So I'm just curious, when you're talking about AI, what particular type of AI are you using or working with? And what are some of the meaningful ways in which this so-called AI that you're using have been integrated in your daily workflows or decision-making process? So first question is basically, what is the AI you're using, or what types? And the second is, how do you see yourself integrating it in your own workplace or the workplaces that you are connected? So let's start with Allison, if that's okay, Allison, so that we don't always go through cycles. Let's disrupt that cycle a little bit. Allison, let's start with you. When you talk about AI, particularly in Title IX initiatives and so forth, or the office, what AI are we talking about, and how is that being integrated?
Yeah, so we just recently piloted transcription services which is very new for the institution, particularly in Title IX. There is a lot of conversation about whether or not that is trauma informed or not. But we started to utilize that for a few reasons. First is to have an accurate record. Prior to that, we had investigators who were summarizing folks' experiences, which can be problematic in a lot of ways. And so having a direct transcription as the party is sharing their experience, that literally comes up as they're talking, they can see all of it. And then rather than getting a summary, we are now sending them a transcript of their conversation, dialogue with the investigator. And it's made the record a lot heavier. There's a lot more paperwork, but it's a much more accurate record. And so folks are more comfortable, I think, a little hesitant when they first get in the room with us, knowing that everything's going to be transcribed in that way, but ultimately is documenting their experience through AI transcription in their own words.
So just to quickly probe you, because I have no idea what this looks like. What
Yeah.
does that look like? Is that like people like having like a recorder and then it's just something? And what software are we talking about when you say transcription services?
Yeah, so we're actually using Teams. So we,
Teams.
our office upgraded our Teams package. I don't know what that looks like to include this service. So we get in a room with folks, we explain to them it's going to be transcribed, we turn on the transcription services, and then there's actually on one of the sides of your panel or side of your screen, you can actually see everything that you're saying popping up. And then once I end the call or I turn off the transcription services, Teams kind of pops up a Word documented version of that. I can review it. AI isn't perfect, so it makes a lot of mistakes. So make sure it's inaccurate, and then the party gets a direct copy of that transcript.
Okay, so I hear some keywords, and I'm curious about others. The word accurate is something that really emerged every time you spoke. You know, AI helps with the accuracy. But the second thing you said was very powerful. It's more work. So given the details you get now, there's more to work with, right? And the third you said was mistakes. So let's keep those in mind. And then I'm just curious. So moving on to you, Teresa, how do you see, what kind of AIs are we talking about in your workplace? Especially, it's very interesting. Yours is not just about the workplace, current workplace. It's also preparing students for a future workplace, which is very interesting. So yeah, I'm curious, what AIs are we talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think not necessarily in the career realm, but I definitely use some transcription services as well. And that I think has been very helpful overall. But particularly with career stuff, a lot of it is helping develop the documents that students are using to apply to jobs, but also using some of the generative AI tools to help shift tones of emails or other communications. Sometimes they will write things down and just get all the information out. And then we encourage them to be like, okay, let's use this AI to maybe figure out how to change the tone, more professional, less professional, whatever you choose professional to mean, and kind of helping with that communication of the things that they've got in their head into the appropriate medium in which they are engaging.
Wow. And what AI are we talking about here, Teresa? Are we talking about ChatGPT or some things like, see, I'm so limited. I only think ChatGPT, but I'm sure there's so much.
Yeah, I think it is whatever their preferred method is, ChatGPT, Gemini, any of those generative AI tools that they are most comfortable using. We really are trying to encourage them to use the AI tools that they are comfortable with, but also using them in a way that is editing or taking ideas and just trying to start something on paper. We're trying to encourage them to not use it as the idea generation all the way through to final product, more of just like a prompt in order to get you started.
Okay, it's very, but beyond what you, from what I'm hearing, Teresa, there's the whole question of what you allow your clients, I mean, I'm just going to call them clients for now, or students, to use. What do you use in your own workplace? Do you use anything for your own work as you're doing this, you know, as you're doing this advisory role?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I personally am someone who is always very late to adopt technology. I
Okay.
like to wait until people have kind of figured out the kinks and things like that. And
Okay.
so I personally don't use AI all that much in my day to day, but I do know that that is where the higher ed sphere is going. And so that's why
Yeah.
it's been something that I feel like is a responsibility to educate myself on. My office spent the whole last year trying to figure out what ways students use AI in order to prepare for their careers and then in their future careers. And so really trying to explore those avenues and be aware that that is where the future is going and we need to responsibly respond to it.
Hey, thank you so much, Teresa. It's very interesting. I mean, one of the current themes I'm seeing from both Allison and Teresa is all about language and the words and transcription and tone and so forth. Very, very interesting. Jacob, Jacob, can you relate to all this? And where do you see? And it's interesting because you're in the teaching and learning realm, which is a very different, well, I mean, everyone else is involved in some kind of learning, but I'm just curious, we're talking about the classroom here, Jacob. What are the kinds of AIs that you've been seeing in your own previous work, right? But especially this virtual world, that's another very different.
Yeah, I mean, so like in my kind of personal life, the AI I almost entirely am using as a student is ChatGPT. But in my professional work before doing this doctoral studies, I dabbled in a variety of different AI, generative AI types of technologies. I found though, particularly a few years ago, that they just weren't that good, and so like it really wasn't like beneficial to like be piloting these in the classroom unless we like really broached it as like an experimental trial and all this students were kind of like on board with this being like a novel kind of like let's see what works and what doesn't work. And that, was difficult because it entailed like a certain amount of buy-in from both students and professors to like be willing to like try something that quite frankly had like a lot of errors, and you had to be willing to like imagine how good this could be in 5 years, which is kind of a difficult ask for students who are paying high tuition and are expecting something out of their college education. But I mean, outside of ChatGPT, I kind of briefly dabbled in some like video AI, generative AI models. We like tried to do some experiments where a lot of professors kind of described to us how they didn't feel comfortable recording videos for their online courses. And so we were trying to think about how AI might streamline this process of creating instructional videos for professors in their online courses. And so like we had one kind of pilot experiment where a professor basically uploaded like all their lecture notes and their entire like knowledge base for the course into this system that we had, and then it basically spit out these very succinct 5-minute videos that could then go into their online course. And from my perspective, it definitely looked like it was AI, right? It definitely looked like it was this like professor with like hands moving in like weird ways. And but yeah, I've dabbled in some of that, and I see I have some optimism for how it may or may not improve learning or may or may not make it more efficient. But I think, my day to day at the moment is almost entirely ChatGPT. That is by far the most useful for me at this moment.
Right. I mean, one of the common themes I'm also hearing from all of you is this whole notion of trial and error. In other words, trying these things, but noticing that they do generate errors to some extent, right? That they're not perfect, but trying to engage with that. But this brings me to the next question, which is oftentimes, when we talk about AI and the way it's promoted, it's all about efficiency, right? This idea that AI or what these tools that we use help us to speed up the process so that we have more time for other things, right? So there's that one element. But also, it can also delay the process if it doesn't work, right? So Allison, you were talking about it's inaccurate, right? So you have to, beyond just the transcription it does, then you have to go back and check on it and so forth. I mean, I'm not sure how that works for you and Teresa as you're giving advising, and I don't know if the tone is right or not based on those things. And Jacob, that's very interesting. This temporal, let's say, impatience of students to not be the objects of trial and error because they are paid for something and so they want the product right now, right? And so do they want to be part of these experiments? So there's that tension between efficiency. But another thing that we are not talking about, and I think that is one of the areas that I want us to focus on today, is the question of ethics, right? The ethics of using AI. And I just wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about how in your respective roles, how does your office, you individually, navigate that tension between the efficiency, which is the ideal scenario, right? But also the ethics of doing this. Jacob, you want to start?
Yeah. So there's a few kind of threads I could pick up on there. First off, when it comes to like questions of efficiency, I think it's sometimes helpful to like couch that as like, what are we offloading? And is that thing that we're offloading valuable to like the thing we're trying to do, right? And so sometimes I think like if we're so narrowly minded, focused on if making things efficient, we may be offloading the very types of interactions and the very types of processes that are actually like meaningful to our work. So for instance, like when I think about like having interactions with instructors. When we created these AI instructional videos, I was really concerned that, like, on one hand, yes, it is efficient for the instructor to create an AI video of themselves, but at the same time, I'm concerned that it's like disrupting the very important interpersonal relationship between the instructor and the student, so that there's a feeling of like mutual dialogue, a feeling of reciprocity, a feeling of getting to know each other, because we know that's an important part of the learning environment. And so when we introduce AI as a way of making things efficient, I do worry that we're kind of losing track of what we're trying to do in the first place, and maybe offloading the types of things that we shouldn't be offloading. And so like I think that brings up like a whole bunch of like ethical types of considerations as well. So I mean, I think it's very clear that AI is a problematic technology at best, when you consider its environmental impacts, when you consider its exploitative labor practices. I think there's a lot of reasons to be really skeptical about like the infrastructure, the social and political, environmental infrastructure that's being degraded by this technology. And I think that we should bear that in mind when we think about not only our personal use, but also like the kinds of policies that we're giving to other people about how we want to use it. So for instance, like, if you're an instructor in a class, I think that it's important to think about not encouraging students to use AI in ways that it seems frivolous, to not use AI in ways that seems like it's, you know, using it for unnecessary reasons, and that we're really being self-conscious about when we use this technology, acknowledging that it's also having some, pretty significant impacts outside of our immediate kind of personal and social sphere as well. But yeah, I mean, personally, I just, I set rules for myself to not use it in ways that are unmeaningful. And I really try to be conscious about like, what am I trying to get out of this technology, and is it worth it? Yeah.
You use a word that I want to come back to the others, the word offloading. And the word you use, offloading, in other words, efficiency is about moving in a particular direction. But as you're moving in a particular direction, you might be in many ways erasing other directions, right? And that's the question of offloading. But what you said about offloading is a wonderful way to think about ethics too, because as we're moving in that direction, we're also offloading to the environment, as you put it. We're also offloading to particular labor practices that continue, social political issues, and so forth. But you use the word frivolous. Can you give us an example of what you mean by frivolous? And then I want to go to the others.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like really easy to like go down like these rabbit holes of like, what can I get ChatGPT to do? What kinds of like wild and crazy things will it say? Like, how far can I push this technology? And like, I understand that there's like a curiosity and like just trying to push this technology to do things, to see what it can do. Um, but I again I worry that like that is kind of like indulging in this kind of like curiosity that is ultimately, you know, harmful to our environment, to other people. And I don't find like these types of like, you know, wasteful uses of technology to be ultimately like a good way of like approaching, generative AI in particular.
Allison, can you relate, or does this make sense to you, or is there other ways where you're dealing with these tensions?
Yeah, so I can completely relate to that. It's a weird space in Title IX because we are neutral, right? And using AI has to serve both parties equally. And we know that folks who have experienced trauma, when they're recalling that, it's not always linear. And it's not always, I don't want to say accurate, but there are sometimes these pockets that are difficult to remember or difficult to recall. When you are doing a transcription, AI generated transcription, we are kind of offloading the humanness of it, of that experience, of the relatability with the investigator. When the investigator is, formulating your experience in a summary, there's a way to kind of work how you perceived that person during the interview in a non-biased, right, neutral way. When you have a transcription, folks feel very tied back to what they said and the order in which they said it. And if I consumed a certain amount of alcohol and that night, and then they say, actually, that's incorrect. Or, I said I was at Brody, but, in recalling it, I actually was at McDonald's Hall or whatever it may be. And one of the big pieces when you get to the end of the Title IX process is they're going to start weighing credibility. And so it's great as the investigator because it offers us a neutral way to have a clear record of what the party said. There's no disputes of what the party said, but we are kind of taking out some of that human relatability and kind of offloading it to AI. It's great for a neutral process. So in this, as the investigator, it's great. But I do think it dehumanizes things. And kind of offloads the experience and the support that our office also does provide support to survivors. And I feel like it kind of changes the dynamic between the investigator and the person that they're interviewing. What may that be, a respondent or a claimant?
It's very interesting, Allison. You talked about this idea of neutral, right?
Yes.
The word neutral. It's very, very interesting. And ideally and I use the word past in a very, very crass way, because past is probably like a year ago, in some cases, whereby you talked about a human connection. What is this being lost when that human connection is like, I'm assuming that the investigator is still asking questions,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And interacting, and something is recording it. But if, say, something is not recording it, how would that dynamic change, in your opinion?
Absolutely. I think even though we are the neutral investigative body, I think it's important to build rapport with the person in front of you, particularly with Title IX and sexual assault. Folks are not typically very comfortable sharing their experience to begin with. Like, this is very personal. This is very private. Coming forward is very difficult to begin with. And then you add this piece of transcription, which is a very powerful, useful tool. I think for some folks that introduces a level of mistrust. Well, if I misspeak, or if I forgot, or if I want to re-add something in later, I think it brings in this level of almost minimizing the rapport you're able to build with the other party in order to make them feel comfortable enough to share their experience in its entirety.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Teresa, your thoughts on those tensions. And, I'll be honest with you. I teach on this, but I didn't know the way it's being used. So thank you. I'm learning a lot from all this. But anyway, go ahead, Teresa.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll just start by saying a lot of the things that Jacob talked about, in the environmental impact and the social impact. Those are some reasons why I personally do not choose to integrate it all that much in my own life. But I have heard people talking about using ChatGPT like Google. And I do think that that's a place where, for me personally, that ethic is a little bit concerning because of how much extra energy it takes there. But in terms of career services specifically, I have seen a lot of students in conversations, also just kind of across the US, who are using ChatGPT to write their cover letters. Cover letters are usually required for job applications, and really they're an opportunity to explain why you're the perfect fit for the job. I tend to tell people it's like, pretend like you're talking to your mom, tell her why this job is perfect for you. And a lot of people don't see the value in cover letters, and so they will choose that as a space to kind of offload that effort. It is not the space that you should choose to offload that effort, but particularly right now, hiring managers are seeing the vast majority of cover letters coming in as pretty much exclusively written by AI. And so when you're seeing that same letter over and over and over again with just small language tweaks, it really does go to what the other two people have been talking about, of that dehumanizing of that relationship. And so that's why I encourage students, use it as ideation to kind of combat that blank page, use it to edit when you're done, or to kind of come up with more ideas. But I do strongly encourage them not to submit a fully written AI cover letter, particularly if they have not done edits. But even if they've done edits, they're not using their own language or their own experiences within that space to actually create that letter. If you've got all of those ideas down and you just need help organizing it, that is fine. But having the cover letter entirely written by AI really takes away the most important part of that, and really does lose that connection that's so important when going through the hiring process.
Wow. I mean, two words come out for me as I was listening to this particular conversation. One is the word offloading, right? But the other that I'm also hearing from all three of you is the word connection. That somehow AI, or using AI, is create a disconnect between humans, between oneself and one's experiences as they try to represent themselves, thereby offloading, right? The connection to the environment, like we forget that there are social material practices surrounding the use of this. So I hear the word connection as well as offloading. But looking ahead, and I hate the word ahead. I mean, even we can look now or in the past, is how do you envision, from your own standpoints, from your work experiences, the human expertise? Right? Each of you are talking about human expertise in different ways, evolving along AI, or the word evolving, is that word evolving the right word? Is it revolutionizing? Should we change? Like, I'm curious, like from your standpoint, how do you envision this whole human expertise being transformed? Let's put it that way, with AI, based on your experiences. Teresa, let's start with you.
Okay. Yeah, I actually read an article, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, about how AI has the potential to continue to help those who are already superstars excel further, and then potentially leaving behind other people when they are relying on it as the entire process rather than using it as a tool. So I do think that, as Jacob was talking about earlier, using it selectively, using it to kind of move some of that energy to something that can be automated. I do think that that is a really smart and valuable way to be using it. I went through K-12 teaching training, so I did a lot of interviews with students. I used to have to transcribe the whole interview. I would go back, I would read it 3 or 4 times. I have ADHD. Reading something 3 or 4 times for a 60-minute long interview, I am going to get lost multiple times and it's going to take me forever to go through that process. You are still supposed to transcribe your own interviews, I think. I think that is still the best practice. But for me personally, going through having it initially transcribed and then being able to follow along and edit, that saves me so much time. I'm able to pay attention to the content rather than the words. And so it really does, as that tool, save me a lot of that time and effort and free me up to be able to start thinking about things and thinking about them sooner. So I think that like used as that tool and not as that entire process really can be valuable for the things that personally take extra time and effort for you and making those easier and more accessible.
Allison, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, it does. I also don't, I can't remember which one of the other panelists mentioned it. I am very technology adverse, just naturally. And so I did not use any AI for a while just because it made me uncomfortable. But I started using ChatGPT to help me put templates together, to help me. We have very strict timelines in Title IX that we have to meet under federal guidelines. And so I don't know much about Excel. And I put into, ChatGPT, I need a certain column to turn red if it's after 3 days to just remind me, like, you got to get to this today. It was wrong the first 2 times, but the third time we got the right formula, and it has made me, like Teresa said, much more efficient, much quicker, keeps me on top of things. Even the transcription services, I really appreciate those because it cuts down the amount of time that I have to spend writing notes and then going back and summarizing them. A lot of my day-to-day work is reading other of the junior investigators' work. And so if I can offload something to AI, like transcription services, or even figuring out how to do something in Excel, it frees me up to be more available for the staff.
Okay. Jacob?
I think this question of expertise is super interesting because expertise is itself like a socially constructed thing, right? Like who counts as expertise? What counts as having expertise? How do we identify being an expert? I think is all very socially situated. And I feel like what's happening right now is that we're all collectively trying to understand like what are like the norms for utilizing AI in all of our different professions and practices, whether I'm a professor, whether I'm doing Title IX work, whether I'm, helping students with their cover letters. I think that there's kind of like this, like, it kind of feels like we're in the Wild West right now, and we're all trying to figure out, like, is it okay for me to use AI in this way? Is it not okay for me to use AI in this way? And if I do use AI, should I tell people that I'm using AI, or do I just kind of discreetly use AI and try to like sneak it through? And so like I think we're all trying to like figure out like what is like the social norms here for our use of AI. And I think that what I suspect what will happen is that as we develop expertise, there'll be norms where like we expect AI to be used in some kind of normative fashion, right? So like I could imagine, for instance, at the doctoral level, it could very well be a norm that you would rely on ChatGPT to do your references and do your like citations and things like that. It's just it's already quite good at doing that. It saves a ton of time, and it's really not the goal of like a lot of graduate seminars to give you a reminder on how to do APA citations. And so there probably will be like this like expectation that like, yeah, like we just use ChatGPT to do that kind of stuff. I think also though, well, and I think you could also look at like the history of technology, right? To kind of like get a sense of that, right? So like if you have expertise in doing a certain thing, there's an expectation that you know how to put a hyperlink into a document, right? Like that's kind of like a norm. I think like most people expect professionals to be able to do these days. It would be like a very strange thing for me as like a graduate student instructor if somebody like asked me like, hey, when is this due? When I could easily point to them to like a syllabus on D2L. And so like having like these like norms of like how we're using technology, I think is going to be like an important part of like establishing, who what counts as an expert and what what expertise looks like. I do, however, think that like there will be an increasing benefit towards spaces and times and places where AI is not being used. I think that like we'll increasingly come to value technology-free zones. We're gonna have to really teach ourselves like how to have face-to-face conversations, how to do work in person, because this still is like the work that is difficult to offload, right? It is the work that AI is still struggling to do, right? At this moment, I can't get an AI bot to come and do this panel for me. And so it's like it now is, if I'm going to be developing expertise as an academic, well, now it's like I got to figure out how to do this in my body right now. And so like I think we're gonna try to learn as a society, when do we use ChatGPT and when do we not use it? And those are going to increasingly come to define the norms for expertise. And I think it's going to change the landscape in important ways.
I appreciate the whole discussion here, and I just wanted to quickly sum up. I don't have the AI software here right now to do that for me. Maybe I should consider that, but I think the word tool is often used. But a tool is a very neutral thing. But as many of you are talking about, tools are used as part of social practices. So is it as neutral or not is one thing. The second point that I heard is the word freeing me up. And it kind of goes back to Jacob, your point about offloading, right? Freeing me up is to take us from something else and be to take the shackles off, whether it's amount of time that's being used so that we can refocus or something, or refocus on other things that might matter more. But the third thing that I've heard is the question of norms. And this is a very interesting idea and something I don't think we've all grappled with. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the role of emotions in AI. In other words, AI can be very uplifting, very nice when it's doing what it's supposed to do, right? And it feels liberating, freeing. But on the other hand, what you're raised, Jacob, is also this idea of, well, what if I am bending the norms, or I don't know the norm, but what if people find out I'm doing this? So there's that whole moral value that I'm hearing here is, what are the moral values of using AI? Am I going to feel shame and therefore I don't want to disclose it, right? If I disclose it, how will my expertise now be questioned? Right? I mean, as I'm hearing that, it's a very, very slippery, I would say, emotional landscape that we're dealing with that I don't think we've addressed. But any comments about this emotional landscape that we're talking about, which is very much tied to what you're talking about, Jacob, the norms? Because when we fit the norms, we're okay. But if we're not, we feel a criminal, we feel victim, or we feel like we're the bad person. You see what I mean? So
Yeah, I think I can chime in on a piece of that. I mean, I think part of like this like tension we feel when we offload some of our work to ChatGPT is that like many of us, like myself included, don't know like how this technology even works, right? And so like I think there's like something really strange about like granting so much of like our work onto a black box basically, right? Like I don't know what data this has been trained on. I don't know who created this technology. I don't know what an LLM is. I don't know what the difference is between, this newest LLM and the previous LLM. And so like I think part of like the tension that we feel is that when we are offloading our expertise onto a technology that is so foreign to us, it's like I don't know. It's like who am I offloading my work to, right? And so like I think that like that kind of like makes us feel inferior in some ways, right? Like this idea that like I have to like offload it onto like this like magical mystical thing that spits back answers to me. that makes me feel like I don't know what I'm talking about in some ways. And it makes me feel like I'm being devious when I like then like take that work that ChatGPT did and I then give it to somebody else and kind of like represent that as my own. Because like I don't know whose this work is, who did this work anymore, right? It's kind of me. Like I kind of prompted this magical mystery box to do something for me. And now I'm representing it to you as something that I did. But not really. You know what I mean? Like I didn't do all of it. And so I just think that there's something about like this like black box, something about
Mhm.
like I don't know how to define my relationship to this black box that kind of begets these like feelings of insecurity, these feelings of like lacking expertise, and these feelings of being like devious to other people.
Mhm.
Because it is taking up more and more of our human work, and we don't know what the heck it is. Yeah.
Allison, Teresa, can you relate to what Jacob's saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of shame, and I think that's just something, that in higher ed that we don't probably talk enough about. And I mean, there's certainly been times where I've, even in my personal life, academically, where I've read something and thought, this is too academically dense. I'm just not understanding. And I'll put it into Chat GBT and say, this is too academically get dense, give this to me in plain terms. And then there really is a sense of like, that shame of like, oh, I get what it's saying. I couldn't catch up to the language, or I couldn't identify with the way that they were explaining it to me. So there it is, this black box of magic knowledge that I think there's certainly a time and a space for, but I think there is a lot of association with shame, especially professionally and academically. When it comes up in conversations, it's almost like whispered, like, oh, well, I used Chat GPT to help me figure that out, just because it is associated with so much, like Jacob said, we don't really know what the guidelines are. We don't really know when it's supposed to be used, when it's not supposed to be used, where the information is coming from, and really the credibility of that. There's been times where I'll put a question in and then I'll read what ChatGPT has spit out and I'll say, "Are you sure?" And it will say no. And I'm like, well, so there does come down to this shame and just concerns and accuracy, I think, in utilizing it.
Mm.
Yeah, I just want
Teresa?
to quickly build off something Allison said really quick. You'd mentioned kind of like looking at this thing and then like kind of disagreeing with it. Like and like I'm okay disagreeing with an author, right? When
Yeah,
like I read like an author's text, like I will critique, something that has somebody's name attached to it, and I know that this is coming from their brain. Because like usually like, I can like kind of like socially position them, right? Like I can say like,
absolutely. Yeah.
well, you're a political economist, you're a critical theorist, whatever. I see where you were trained. I can see like the history of like where you got to where you are. But when I get like a piece of text from a magical black box technology, it's like so difficult for me to say like it's very difficult for me to like triangulate that technology, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I have to like it's a very difficult thing for me to like exert agency back over that thing because like I don't know where it's coming from. Like I don't know
Mm-hmm.
I, I don't know you. Like you're just like it's spitting these answers out of the ether, and that's a very different way of like exerting agency over knowledge. Because like yeah, I mean, if I'm reading something that Dr. Shah Jahan wrote, like I know Dr. Shah Jahan, and I can kind of like, you know, I have some angles where I can push and agree, but like yeah, ChatGPT, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
It's this amorphous thing that's been trained on millions and millions of data points, and yeah, I don't know what that means anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Teresa? And then we'll end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it will probably end up going like incorporating calculators into school and incorporating laptops instead of writing things down, where there is a lot of resistance at first just to that change. And then now we have calculators on our phones that we walk around in our pockets with every day. And every classroom that you walk into, everybody pretty much has that laptop. So I think there is some aspect of just like as we get used to it, as time goes on, a lot of that shame around using it will definitely transition into just this is the norm. But I do think one of the big differences is like calculators are not necessarily coded with all of this knowledge that has been chosen to be incorporated into what ChatGPT decides to spit out to people. And I think one of the biggest growing, like the biggest growing field right now is data entry and those AI trainers and things like that, really kind of building that stuff behind the scenes. But I do think we want to stay critical of whose knowledge it is that we are actually incorporating into this black box, as Jacob said, and thinking about no knowledge is inherently neutral. We're all taking it in from our own lenses. And I think that just like it's a different sphere now with just kind of continuing to be conscious of that ethic behind how we engage with it.
Well, thank you, Jacob, Teresa, and Allison. We're now going to open it up for Q&A. You look if we could see if there are any questions in audiences. Please chime in. Do you want to tell us, are we going to be able to hear them? Are we still staying in the webinar mode?
Yeah, we have the Q&A section from Zoom.
Okay.
And
Okay,
I don't know
perfect.
whether everyone can see the question section.
Okay.
We already have
Okay.
one from Brad. So
Yeah, okay, Dr.
I'll read
Cox,
it.
wonderful. Yeah.
From the question from Brad says, I am curious about another side of the potential ethics. AI is going to be an increasing part of our lives, jobs, futures, etc. If we as educators are reluctant to engage with it with appropriate caution and skepticism, or discouraging students' use of it, are we setting them or us to fall behind their peers or employees?
Mm, mm. That's a very, very powerful ethical question to raise, Dr. Cox, particularly as we talked, I love these temple metaphors we talk about here. Free me, offloading, and then this thing about leaving behind is a very interesting. So yeah, I'm just curious, the panelists, what do you think? And especially, let's start with you, Teresa. I mean, this is exactly the major arena that you're working in.
Yeah, so I think one of the main things that seems to be a disconnect between the public and people in academia is we can't actually prepare students for a job. We can prepare them for a field, we can build them skills, but by the time we are teaching technology, we teach it freshman year, they graduate 4 years later, things are moving so fast that that stuff we taught them the first year that in their program may be obsolete by the time they are actually getting into the workplace. And so a lot of it is students need to think about their transferable skills, building that basic knowledge. And we can definitely help with that basic understanding of kind of the uses around ethics around chat GPT. But once they enter into a workplace, that workplace is going to have their own culture and norms and uses around that. So I think really how we want to be preparing people, especially as they go into the workforce, is preparing them to know potential uses for it so that they can engage in it once the specific company does their onboarding and training that they would need to do to prepare their future employees to work at that specific place.
Jacob, Allison, and then I have another question specifically for Allison, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think technology has always played this social role, right? Like if you exist in 2025 and you refuse to use email, you're behind, right? I think that's like a common like kind of like thing we can all accept. If you're not using email as a working professional in 2025, you are behind. If you don't know how to use a calculator or if you don't know how to use Google search in effective ways, yes. So and that I think this is now the case with AI, right? Like I think that if we refuse to engage with AI in meaningful and intentional ways, there will be a perception that a socially kind of defined perception that you are behind. I think we're allowed to critique that. I think we're allowed to say like, well, who's defining the normative vision of what's ahead and what's behind? I think there's a very rich discussion to have about those normative values about what counts as being ahead and behind. But yeah, I mean, I think Brad, I think you're right. There will be a social stigma attached to not engaging with this technology in some kind of fashion, form or fashion. Yeah.
Can
I
I
just want
switch
to
the thing?
briefly piggyback.
Uh,
Sorry, go ahead.
no,
No,
I
so
was
we
going to
have a
come to you,
generation
Allison,
of like
because
Kindle kids is what they're calling it. I have a kindergartner, and my husband and I were very against buying our kids a Kindle. They don't need a Kindle; they need to be outside. We were very intentional about that. And he is behind in kindergarten and learning how to use that tablet. They learn their vowels and their numbers and their letters. They each have an own tablet assigned to them at school, and he'll be okay. But we did a disservice to him by discouraging, just on a much smaller scale, the use of a mini computer. Now he was a little bit behind with his peers because this is just a normal part. I think we're going to get to a point where ChatGPT and Grammarly are almost like a Google. And if you're not capable of functioning them in an ethical and appropriate way, it's almost going to be something you talk about in hiring committees, right? Like, well, this is a skill this person doesn't have.
well, I think we can continue with this discussion, but I think it connects to the next question about questions around potential ethics. And Eula, do you want to read that question from Lashandra?
Yeah, so this question is specifically for Allison. Your work often involves sensitive or identifiable experiences. How do you protect the emotional safety and agency of participants when AI tools are introduced into the process?
Yeah, so that's a great question because Title IX is very sensitive work. We don't start using the AI until we've kind of prepped them for it, right? Like we're not recording it, we are transcribing it. These are different. We provide anyone who is coming in with a Title IX covered or RBSM prohibited conduct under MSU's policy with an advocate who is a confidential advocate before we even start speaking with them. We put them in a breakout room to kind of hold space for them to kind of prepare for whatever they're going to share for us. It doesn't take away the stress and that uncomfortability of just not being comfortable using AI transcription. But we also remind them that this isn't criminal court. We encourage you to share everything you have with us, and that would be helpful for a more thorough investigation. But I can't obligate you or compel you to share anything you're not comfortable sharing.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Other questions or comments from our audience? Okay, we have another one. Okay, wonderful. I like this Q&A. Great. Hey, Eula, do you want to read it out?
Yeah, so we have another comment from IC. She said, thank you everyone for these insightful thoughts. And also hi to Jacob. When talking about AI, we originally hoped to use AI to improve or assist with difficult and dangerous tasks, such as rescue operations and similar efforts. However, it now seems that the first area being replaced are actually create ones, especially with a recent release of Sora 2. AI can already produce films. It seems like human creativity, which is something we've taken pride in, seems almost insignificant in comparison. So as higher ed professionals, how do you think AI will transform the field of education, also a field filled with creativity in the future? And what roles should we educators play in the landscape?
Great question by IC, and I'm assuming just because you know Jacob is not the only one who's going to answer this, but I'm just curious. What are your thoughts about, yeah, this is a fantastic question about thinking about futurity, is how do you see it transforming the field of education in the future?
I can take a stab. That is a really good question. I think I have a couple threads I can pick up on. One is I've been reading lately about, in the age of algorithms, in the age of data, in the age of AI, when everything is predictable, creativity now takes the form of irrationality, unpredictability. And I do think like I sincerely think that you're gonna see creative mediums that are gonna embrace like nonsense, right? Like so like it's already been like a method of like political resistance now, like to resist capture on platforms to feed our platforms nonsense data, right? Because we know that we're being analyzed, we know that we're being read, we know that our data is being harvested and collected, and so political activists will feed it nonsense data to resist organizational capture. And so like I do think like there will be more and more emphasis on the avant-garde, the irrational,
Mhm.
because I think that is kind of what AI seems to be not capable of reproducing. It wants predictability and it wants to generate what feels like we've seen in the past. It's like this ability of creating novelty through the irrational, I think will be one source of like kind of creative agency in the future. But I think more to like the heart of your question, like I think there's going to be an increasing like need to foster like critical agency within our students, right? To say like, if you read something, you don't need to agree with that. You have thoughts, you have a history and experience. You're an embodied person with feelings, and you can use that agency you have as a human to push back against narratives that you're reading online, right? This has already been a problem with like being duped by uh, false information online. I think it's going to be increasingly more and more the norm that we're just going to read wrong and incorrect information online. And we need to encourage our students to say, use your critical thinking and use your critical agency to verify that and and I think it's going to be on educators to facilitate those critical thinking skills. I think it's going to be incredibly important that we facilitate that kind of human creative agency more and more. Yeah, but that's a very rich question that we could write a paper about that one.
Allison and Teresa, particularly coming from an administrative side, right? As educators working in particular offices with different subsets of students or groups, how do you see this question impacting you and your envisioning of future of your own profession, whether it's career advisor working in Title IX offices? Yeah.
Well, one of the other trends that you're seeing, more anecdotally, but I think it's still, there's data on it too, is the trend of people who are in the humanities becoming more and more important and competitive within the job market because a lot of those low-level, entry-level jobs in STEM are being taken over by the people who are, training to be data analysts and things like that. And in STEM in particular, those transferable skills are real or not as focused on as that hard knowledge content, whereas in the humanities, those transferable skills are really kind of built more and emphasized more. And so I do think that there is going to be an emphasis on those transferable skills and thinking about developing leadership and critical thinking within that space. But I also think there's going to be a shift in the way that assessments are done. If you can just Google something and get the answer, if you can use ChatGPT and get an even more detailed answer, that is not an accurate assessment of student learning. And so I've seen this in a couple of professors that I've been talking to, is that they are having to not only shift from like online courses to now in-class paper and pen again, but really critically thinking about different ways in which they assess or asking themselves, what are we assessing? And trying to assess some of those transferable skills rather than that just straight content knowledge that anyone can find in a second or two.
Mm, mm. Very, very interesting. Allison?
No, I think I would just echo both what Teresa and Jacob said. I think my concern with in academia, at least in the future with AI, is that it's going to be a way out of doing the hard work. It's going to be a way out of actually doing the work and educating yourself and being proud of the knowledge, right? I think some folks you get that piece of paper when you finish your degree and it feels like, I put all of the, I put all this work into it and I'm proud of this. And I'm concerned that some folks are finishing classes fully assisted by AI. And when they're leaving, how much knowledge are they really taking in them? And then we're labeling those folks as experts, right? So I think really important to start finding where those boundaries are and what the norm is in order to ensure that, we're educating students appropriately, but we're also labeling them as experts in a field that we feel confident they truly are experts in, and that they have, created those skills and they have the critical thinking to go out into the world and interact with other professionals outside of, a chat bot.
Well, I don't know if this is AI, but I always think about clocks as being avatars of our life too, mediating everything, and we are at time. I also noticed that there were other comments from our audience, and I think this is fantastic. Thank you for the audience who are here in engaging with us. And as one of you, I think it was Dr. Cox who raised, we don't often have this conversation of what's happening on the ground versus what's happening in the literature as we're thinking about these ethical issues. I think that kind of conversation that we've had here was super, super helpful. And I hope we can continue. And maybe we need to do something like this, Yulo, next term too, to bring other people from different offices or other institutional types as well in this conversation. So I want to quickly say, Jacob, Allison, Teresa, thank you so much for being here and sharing, amongst busy schedules, talking about the role of AI. I want to give a big shout out to Yulu for organizing and making sure that this goes smoothly. And thank you everybody in the audience for being here. And we are going to share this video with others after this, so it'll be up in our website. And I'm going to share this with my class too. I'm teaching a course in educational visualization, and I think some of you are in it. So anyway, thank you everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. And yeah, I hope we can continue these AI talks and hale programs in the future. Take care, everybody. Bye for now. And Yulu, if you don't mind, I just want to talk to you for a second right after this, okay? Bye, everybody. And we can stop recording now, Yulu.